The morning sun rose slow over Dry Creek Valley, spilling gold across the endless fields of dust and sage. The town was just waking up. A few wagons creaked along the main street, the steady ring of the blacksmith's hammer echoed through the air, and a single bell tolled from the small white church perched on the hill. It was a morning like any other, but for Anna Miller it was the start of the day that would change everything. Inside the old Miller ranch house, Anna sat by the window, a pair of worn leather boots cradled in her hands. They were cracked and sun-bleached, still carrying the faint, familiar scent of trail dust and gunpowder. They had belonged to her husband, Cole, a man who'd ridden off into a storm 3 months ago and never returned. The town whispered that he'd abandoned her, that his pride was bigger than his love. Anna had tried to believe them, tried to harden her heart, but the ache never left. That morning, she'd started her chores just like always, feeding the horses, mending a broken fence, pretending she was fine. But an unshakable feeling had pulled her back inside, to the old wooden chest at the foot of their bed. Maybe it was the crushing silence of the house, or the weight of unspoken words that still hung in the air. Lifting the heavy lid, she saw his boots lying on top of his folded clothes. One felt heavier than the other. Her breath caught. As she turned the boot over, a folded piece of paper, yellowed and creased with time, slipped out and fluttered to the floor. Her heart began to thud against her ribs, a frantic, desperate rhythm. With trembling hands, she picked it up and carefully unfolded it. The handwriting was Cole's, rough, uneven, but unmistakably his. "Anna," it began, "if you're reading this, I reckon I didn't make it back. There's something I never told you, something I should have said long before I rode out that night." Her eyes blurred with unshed tears. She took a shaky breath, forcing herself to read on, to finally hear the words he never got to say. "The night of the fire, I wasn't running from you. I was riding to stop a man named Carver. He was coming to burn the ranch down, to settle a debt I'd made long before I met you. I figured I could face him, stop him before he ever reached our door. I failed you in ways I can't name, Anna. But you deserve the truth, not silence." Anna pressed the letter to her chest, a single tear tracing a path through the dust on her cheek. All this time, she'd tortured herself, believing he'd left because of their fight that last night. The words they'd thrown at each other, sharp as knives. She had screamed at him, told him she wished he'd never come back, and now it seemed her wish had been granted in the cruelest way possible. The truth was, he hadn't been running from her at all. He'd been riding toward danger, for her. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the shutters as if echoing the storm in her soul. The ranch, once a home filled with laughter and love, suddenly felt emptier than ever. The silence was no longer just quiet, it was a gaping wound. That evening, as twilight painted the sky in shades of bruised purple and orange, Anna saddled her chestnut mare, Ruby. Her dress was plain, her face pale but set with a new, unyielding determination. She rode into town and tied Ruby to the hitching post outside the saloon, the one place she knew she might find answers. Taking a deep breath, she pushed open the swinging doors and stepped onto the creaky porch. Inside, the piano played a low, lazy tune. Men laughed over whiskey glasses, und kjære hundlehoge, but the noise died the moment they saw her. A woman, a widow, dressed in somber clothes, didn't belong in a place like this. The air grew thick with tension. Ignoring the stairs, she walked straight to the bar, her boots making a steady, deliberate sound on the wooden floor. "You know a man named Carver?" she asked, her voice clear and direct. The barkeep, who'd been polishing a glass, froze. He glanced nervously around the room. "Lady," he whispered, "you best not be speaking that name too loud around here." "Why not?" Anna challenged, her gaze unwavering. "'Cause he don't like folks rememberin' what he done." A cold fire ignited in Anna's eyes. "Then he'll sure hate me," she said, her voice dropping to a near whisper, yet carrying across the silent room. A man stood up, tall, unshaven, with eyes like chips of cold, hard steel. He looked at her, his expression unreadable. "You looking for me, miss?" he asked, his voice a low growl. The saloon fell completely silent. Every eye was on them. Anna turned slowly, her heart pounding, but her fear was now eclipsed by a burning need for the truth. "You're Carver," she stated, not a question. He offered a slight, mocking smirk. "Depends who's askin'." Anna Miller. Her voice caught for just a second, the name a painful reminder of all she had lost. Cole Miller's wife. The smirk vanished from his face. His gaze darkened, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes. "Well," he said softly, his voice laced with a new kind of intensity, "that explains the fire in your eyes." Anna took a step closer, the space between them crackling with unspoken history. "What happened that night?" she demanded. "You killed my husband, didn't you?" Carver leaned back in his chair, the wood creaking under his weight. He let out a humorless chuckle. "Killed him? Nah, he came after me like a fool caught in a thunderstorm. Tried to be a hero, save you from what was comin'. I didn't have to kill him. The storm did that for me." Her hand tightened on the rough wood of the bar, her knuckles turning white. "You set that fire," she accused, her voice trembling with barely suppressed rage. "I lit the first match, sure," he admitted, his tone casual, almost bored. "But he's the one who lit the rest of the story, miss. He wrote his own ending, thinking he was some kind of hero." Her breath hitched. She wanted to scream, to lash out, to make this man feel even a fraction of the emptiness she'd carried for 3 long months. The cold silence of a bed that was never warm, the taste of ash in the air. But then Carver leaned forward, his expression changing. "He said something before he fell, you know," he said, his voice dropping. Anna's eyes snapped to his, her entire body rigid. Carver's tone softened, losing its hard edge, becoming almost human. He said, "Tell Anna I ain't running this time." He paused, letting the words hang in the air. Then the lightning hit the ridge. I never saw him again. Anna's knees went weak, and she stumbled back, grabbing a bar stool to keep from falling. The entire room blurred, the faces and whispers fading into a distant hum. With a shaking hand, she pulled Cole's letter from her pocket and laid it on the bar, the fragile paper a testament to his final act of love. A new strength surged through Anna. This wasn't just about vengeance anymore. It was about honor, about bringing her husband home. "Help me find where he fell." Carver looked at her, a long, searching look. He saw not a vengeful widow, but a woman searching for peace. Finally, with a slow, heavy movement, he nodded once. "North Ridge," he said, "near the old mesquite tree." Anna stood, her spine straight, her resolve absolute. "Then we ride at dawn." That night she didn't sleep. Under a pale half-moon, she sat on her porch, Cole's letter in her hand, his boots at her feet, waiting. When the first light of morning began to break, painting the horizon in streaks of pink and gold, the sound of hooves echoed through the quiet valley. Carver arrived, his coat torn, his hat pulled low, a man burdened by his own ghosts. They didn't speak. Words were unnecessary now. Together they rode out, a cloud of dust rising behind them, 2 unlikely figures joined by a shared, tragic past. The sky ahead was beautiful and cruel, a vast canvas of hope and sorrow. Somewhere out there in the quiet, unforgiving bones of the land lay a man who had died for love and forgiveness. Anna whispered to the wind, a silent promise carried on the morning air. "I'll find you, Cole, I promise." And as they crested the ridge, a single raven took flight, its shadow sweeping across the earth below like a memory reborn, a final, somber goodbye. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this story, please like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss our next video. We'll see you next time. The sun rose slow and quiet that morning, spreading a soft golden light over the open plains as Anna and Carver rode north. The land was still damp from last night's rain, and the silence felt sacred, as if the earth itself was holding its breath. They didn't speak much. The only sounds were the steady rhythm of hooves on wet ground and the familiar creak of saddles. Anna's mind was a storm. Every memory of Cole played in flashes: his easy laugh, the way he'd tip his hat when he caught her watching him, the promise he'd made by the old oak tree on their wedding day. "Ain't nothin' I won't face for you, Anna." She'd thought those were just sweet words, poetry from a cowboy's tongue, but now, knowing what he'd done, how he'd ridden straight into danger just to protect her, they felt like scripture. She glanced over at Carver. His hat shadowed most of his face, but the hard set of his jaw told her everything she needed to know. It spoke of regret, maybe even a deep-seated shame. He wasn't the kind of man who would ever say sorry out loud, but his heavy silence said plenty. By midday, they reached the ridge. The land fell away beneath them into a breathtaking vista of red cliffs and dry ravines stretching as far as the eye could see. A single, gnarled mesquite tree stood near the edge, its gray branches stark against the bright sky. Anna dismounted slowly. Her boots sank into the soft earth. "This is where?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Carver nodded, his gaze fixed on the tree. "He came riding through here that night. The storm was wild, thunder so loud it made the ground shake. He was trying to warn the town." Anna turned toward him, her heart pounding. "Warn them?" Carver swallowed hard, finally meeting her eyes. "My men. They were supposed to burn more than just your ranch. I didn't know until it was too late. He stopped it, stood right in front of the wagons, said if they wanted the town, they'd have to go through him." Anna's breath caught in her throat. "And they did?" Carver's eyes darkened with the memory. "They tried, but lightning struck first. A massive bolt. Horse reared, threw him down the hill. When the fire cleared, all we found was his rifle in that tree, half split from the strike." Anna walked to the edge of the ridge, her boots crunching on loose stones. The wind whipped her hair across her face, carrying the clean scent of rain and dust. Her eyes scanned the ground: rocks, dry grass, a scatter of old bones that might have belonged to a horse. Then, near the tangled roots of the old mesquite, she saw it. A small, weathered cross made of 2 sticks tied together with twine. Someone had been here before. She knelt. Her fingers brushed the dirt, trembling. Beneath the cross was a single bullet casing, half buried in the soil. Carver came to stand behind her, his shadow falling over the small marker. "That's where we laid what we could find," he said, his voice rough. Anna looked up from the makeshift grave. "Why come back?" she whispered, the question hanging in the air between them. He hesitated, then said, "Ain't to a day that's gone by I didn't see his face when I closed my eyes. A man like that deserved peace, not a grave made of smoke and ash." A flicker of something, maybe understanding, passed through Anna's eyes. "Then help me give him one," she said. They worked in silence as the sun began its descent. Anna gathered stones, her hands steady, stacking them with a care that bordered on reverence. Carver helped, though every movement seemed heavy, an act of penance. The sky shifted from gold to amber, then to a soft rose, and finally a deep, forgiving purple. When the last stone was laid, creating a proper cairn, Anna set Cole's worn leather boots at the base. She pulled the folded note from her pocket and read the words aloud, her voice soft but unwavering. "You deserved truth, not silence." She carefully folded it again, pressing it between 2 of the stones. "You gave your life for me, Cole," she whispered to the wind, "and I'll spend mine honoring that." Carver took off his hat, holding it against his chest in a silent show of respect. "I can take you back now," he offered quietly. But Anna shook her head, a new resolve hardening her expression. "No, there's something I need to finish first." He frowned, a line of concern creasing his brow. "What's that?" She stood, her eyes glinting with a quiet fire in the twilight. "The men who rode with you, the ones who burned the town." Carver froze, his face paling. "They're long gone, Anna, scattered to the winds." You know where one is, she stated, not as a question but as a fact. The silence stretched, filled only by the rising wind. Finally, Carver spoke, his voice low. There's a man named Holt. He led the raid that night. He took the gold, and he left the rest of us to hang for it. He's been laying low near Clearwater Pass. If you're serious about this, that's where you start. Anna turned toward her horse without another word. Then we ride at first light. Carver let out a long sigh, a sound of resignation. You ain't got to do this alone. I know, she said softly, glancing back at him, her silhouette framed by the last light of day. But I reckon forgiveness don't mean forgetting. They camped under the stars that night. The fire crackled low, its flames dancing against the vast darkness. Somewhere in the distance, coyotes howled their lonely song. Anna sat wrapped in Cole's old familiar coat, staring into the mesmerizing flames. Carver's voice broke the long silence. You ever think he'd want this? You, out here chasing the past? Anna didn't look up from the fire. He'd want peace, but peace don't come until justice does. Carver nodded slowly, understanding dawning in his eyes. Then I'll ride with you, he said. She finally turned to him, a flicker of surprise on her face. Why? He stared into the fire, his expression unreadable. 'Cause I owe that man my soul. And maybe helping you find yours is how I start to make it right. Anna didn't answer. She just stared at the flame, and for a fleeting moment she thought she saw Cole's face flicker there, smiling the way he used to. The night grew still. The promise of dawn hung heavy in the air. Somewhere ahead, in the rugged country of Clearwater Pass, waited redemption, or a final reckoning. And as the first gust of wind swept the ashes across the firelight, Anna whispered into the night, Tomorrow, Cole. Tomorrow I finish what you started.